Hey, oh, yeah. I am so sorry that my internet is insane today.
Totally fine. That was cool. You just like emerged.
Okay, so let's give this a shot, Jen. They're doing
Sure.
all kinds of work out on the street, and it's interrupting our reception somehow.
Yeah. All right. So, hi, Glenn. I'm sorry you're having internet trouble.
I'm sorry for you that I am.
I don't mind. It's really exciting to get to meet you and talk to you.
You too, Jen. Thank you.
How's it going leading up to the premiere, the release of the film?
It's very exciting. This film is. I feel like I put truly me into every frame of it.
Yeah.
Even drawing is such a big part of this. I drew more for this movie than I did for Little Mermaid. Every shot
What?
in the movie has got
Yeah.
drawings in it somehow.
Oh my gosh, I was gonna start asking about that. But yeah, just like before I started properly, I also did want to say that I'm sorry that it's like this year that you have your feature directorial debut, and of course, with everything going on, you can't quite celebrate it how you probably imagined it. So I'm sorry about that you can't celebrate with the crew and everything.
Well, thank you for saying that, Jen, but I really believe there's great purpose to everything, and that makes this film that much more unique. And when I look at the message of this film,
Hmm.
this I can't think of a better movie to come out than this year for
Yeah,
what the message is.
you know what? That's a very good point. But yeah, so if you don't mind, I'd love to dive a little deeper. Well, I guess start from the beginning. So when you were approached to direct this film, how far along was the story? Were you given a full script? Was it just a treatment? Was there a full story when you stepped in?
There was a full script. It was not a musical. I had just given a talk in Annecy in 2017, and the whole topic was thinking like a child, in which
Mhm.
I described everything that I love about animation, um, particularly characters that believe the impossible is possible. I was talking about Ariel and the Beast, and even Kobe had that same spark. When I think of Faith, I think of Kobe. They're similar. They have this incredible desire inside of them. And anyways, I was talking about my love of animation. In the audience was Melissa Cobb, who would become the head of Netflix animation, and Palin Chow, who was the head
Yeah.
of Pearl
Pearl.
Studios. And between the two of them, they had this script, Over the Moon, with a character that was the epitome of that believing the impossible is possible. And so afterwards, they basically tackled me and said, "You got me," and both Jenny and myself. Jenny is my producer, and we felt like, yeah, I think we are meant to do this. So
Yeah.
that's how it started.
That's awesome. Yeah, something I really loved about Fei Fei was she was kind of this character that I feel like, yeah, you've had a lot of experience with these young girls who are adventurous and they get spirited away to this fantastical place. And I loved that she was this smart, science-oriented girl, but then she also still did have this unwavering faith in this unknown thing. And I loved like that you kind of married those two often, kind of opposing ideas together.
Well, she's the product of both parents. They
Yeah.
both are in her DNA.
Hmm.
I just find that that's the most fascinating thing is animating. um, what I was taught by Frank and Ollie, and they would say, Glenn, don't animate what the character is doing, animate what the character is thinking and feeling. And this character was going to be constantly in the movie. What I wanted to show was the moment of discovery in her eyes that see the thinking happening. Um, don't have that happen elsewhere. Make it the central point. Like
Yeah.
there's this one moment, there's a shot, one of my favorite in the movie is when Fei Fei sees Mrs. Jeong and her dad's hand touch. And it's not just a casual one, there's love in that touch.
Hmm.
And and horror in her eyes. You
Yes.
cut back to her and nothing's happening except just this subtle little the
Yeah.
eyebrows lift, and then the lower corners of the mouth go down as her world turns upside down. You feel so much. How can you communicate that if it's not in the most subtle little movements? And um, that that's what really drew me to wanting to animate or direct her.
Yeah. I say there was another, it's not as poignant as that moment, but there is another moment that I remember watching the film and just being like, oh, like it was such a cute character moment where she's with her dad and she's just, they're putting light bulbs into these lanterns and like she's not looking and she kind of starts to putting in and then she messes up and she gets frustrated and then she looks in and does it. And I was just like, that's such like a lovely little performance in that, like that just such a, it was so, I loved it. It said so much about her.
Jen, I love talking with you. For one thing, I storyboarded that area, and that little moment, as I was doing that, I thought, well, I always think in terms of symbols.
Mm-hmm.
The actions that we are seeing, even the designs of the characters, have a deeper level, and that idea of putting in the bulb was this whole idea of connecting to her dad, and
Yeah.
and as a symbol of that, and the lantern is going to light up, but it's not working.
Mm-hmm.
And she's got to make it work, and she's going to make it work. And it's this disconnect between the two of them. It's really, those kinds of things are throughout that movie.
Yeah. No, it's fun because I've managed to watch it a couple times and yeah, I just like I pick up a little bit more every time and I feel like that's always like a sign of a good film experience. It's just like looking for more and wanting to find more because even the one of the early songs, the song about the mooncakes, it's so charming and the whole film is in that song. You know, the secret, you know, the meaning in the mooncakes, and I was just like, I love when films do that. Like, I loved it. So when did it become a musical?
Well, it was not written as a musical, and as I was reading it, I was very aware of the depth of the story and where it was going to go, and the lessons that you're going to have to learn were very adult and difficult, and it could be a very dark story. Not that dark is, there's something wrong with that, but it needs to be the kind of a story that children and adults want to be part of. Like they're drawn to it, like there's a light shining out of this. That it was very important that we have songs that are moving the story forward. Like you put a rocket in them and now the story is launched forward. So even the moment where Feifei is singing Rocket to the Moon, I really want to animate that moment of discovery and see that point where she makes the decision. Those are the things that you don't want to skip, and put it in the middle of the song where she says, I'm going to build a rocket to the moon. You know, she realizes it there. And all of the songs became ways of emotionally telling that story that lift you up. It's not so much an intellectual thing that we are trying to get our point across, but an emotional one.
Yeah.
And even the symbols, I mean, have somebody like Chin alongside of her, who's constantly being an illustration of what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to go through the thing that seems impossible.
Yeah.
Or her running away from problems, running away from what's hard.
Mm-hmm.
You can't run away further than go to the dark side of the moon.
That's true. I didn't think of it like that. I saw in an interview that the film was boarded in like 4 or 5 months, and you mentioned boarding like specific stuff. So you were also credited as a story artist on this film. So I'm curious, like, what the boarding process was like. And I guess it does sound like you were really involved in it too. That it was like, was that 4 or 5 months just to get like the initial reel up, or like did you feel like you had the film in that time frame?
I felt like we had about 85% of what was going to stay
Yeah.
in that first screening,
Wow.
uh, which was, I don't know, it'd be impossible in any other situation. Part of the beauty of Netflix was, as Melissa Cobb talked about what she wanted this experience to be, to create this little animation studio. We would be the first ones in the building, and the first ones that would launch from within Netflix. Uh,
Yeah.
she talked about the importance of creative freedom. Um, and I'm thinking, well, is this really going to be that way? Can this be true? But it turns out it was true, and
Yeah.
gave us such focus on delivering the film very much in the way that I wanted it to be. I could storyboard and keep what I wanted there to be of the boards in the movie. And it allowed us to do the film, I'd say, a year faster than any other kind of a film, and yet not. Well, what it accomplished was allowing us to put all of our effort into not only the story, but the animation that was going to take so much effort,
Yeah.
the visual look of the film. I mean, there was so much invention that we needed to do to actually do that. And I think all of the money that was spent on this film is actually up on the screen, not on the cutting room floor.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
um,
It was very much true to her, what Melissa's vision was of
yeah.
having a studio that supported its creators.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear that. I feel like I hear that a lot about Netflix, to their credit. So hear me out. I have sort of like a long-winded question, but it has a point. So like, to my understanding, when you worked on Tangled, that was sort of a transition period at Disney where a lot of the animators were maybe more traditional 2D animators and they were switching over to CG. But then your experience working with Sony Pictures ImageWorks on this one was more people that, you know, their background was probably only in CG animation. So was there any sort of difference that you may have noticed in their approach to shots or blocking or performances that might have been different, especially like as a character animator yourself?
Well,
I know, it's like I threw you one.
well, you're touching on an area that was so important for me, was the animation. And we were working with Sasha, who is just a fantastic lead, who knew their team intimately.
Mhm.
And we talked about the kind of performance we needed, looking for female animators as well who would relate to Fei Fei and Jeong, looking for Asian artists that could relate to the culture and help me
Yeah.
understand the culture I was stepping into. Um, Early on, I had suggested that we approach it like animating Ariel. I had Sherry Stoner come in as a model for Ariel, to kind of bring a cohesiveness. And Sasha said, well, you know, Glenn, I really would like it if we could have the animators shoot their own live action, film themselves,
Mhm.
because then they'll have to crawl into the skin. They will know the emotions. And for this film, more than any other, I just felt like you're right. I mean, if you can get those animators to really feel it, they are going to invest something surprising and remarkable. And that was one of the most joyful things, is watching the different animators act out their shots.
Yeah.
They would have different versions of it, and I could say, this part of here is really good, that part of there is really cool, and then I could do a drawing and say, but I'm thinking of something like this in the middle there. And it was, you could actually have a live action version of this movie. Animators cut together, and it was, gosh, it was dizzyingly wonderful to see. And our animation sessions were a joy to be part of.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. So then does that mean, So was it like when you kicked off an animator on a shot or a sequence of shots, was that where you mentioned earlier that your hand was like, you know, probably on many frames of this film. So were you kicking them off, and were you like doing like a lot of drawings in terms of the performances you wanted then? Or was it like you would kind of fill out their blocking, or like when did that, like the draw overs kind of come in? Because I feel like for me too, I also remember that's like one of the prominent things I remember about the behind the scenes stuff for Tangled was like, you know, B-roll of you always drawing over the CG animation and just like always pushing the performances, like just to get that little bit more, that really like that final 10% that's always like the biggest 10%.
Yeah, that was throughout every shot was drawing over the animation. In that, the Tangled stuff, that was John Cars that was filming me doing that. And about halfway through this film, I asked John to come on and
As a co-director,
work
yeah.
me. And it was wonderful to have him working. We had 120 animators working on this movie, which is a huge number. So it was very important to have somebody who I get and I understand. And Sony was really leaning into developing a working system there that allowed me to be me.
Yeah.
So developing a way for me to draw, and I could actually animate real time on the screen over top of like Gobi was one of the first shots of Gobi. He's running along and he's like, he looks kind of like an earth animal, and he can't be that way. It's got to be unpredictable, wacky, but floaty, bouncy. I don't know, words that you can't just say that. So I did gestural animation. You do a couple seconds for a sketch, and next one, the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And then you push play, and you can see him moving across, and you spend 5 minutes, and you move on to the next shot. And that was the way we worked through the entire thing, or often acting it out, just standing there performing, and they would videotape what I was doing. Or there's one moment in the movie where Chang'e realizes that Hoyi is disappearing and he's gone, and you just see her face, and there's this like loss, this realization is her dream is died. And I had a video of my granddaughter thinking, when she was just like 3 years old, and she thought she was talking to us on FaceTime or whatever it was, and she says, "Hi Mima, hi Bebop," and she calls me Bebop, and her smile. And then there's this moment where she realizes we're not there, and it just, it was like somebody pulled the plug out of her emotions, and it all drained out of her face. So I showed that video, said, "This is what I want." And so that's what was used as inspiration for that moment.
Oh, wow. Oh man. So it really does sound like 2D was still like a really, like a driving force behind this. And it makes sense, again, with your background, to like really show what you wanted as a director. So I was going to ask if you had felt like your approach to CG animation changed since you had worked on Tangled, and it doesn't really sound like it, because it's like, it sounds like you communicate the same way.
Yeah, no, it has to be like this. It will, as long as I'm involved in animation, it's going to be acting, drawing, and anything I can do to get an idea across. And then also invite the animators to do what I would do when I was animating. I want them to approach it the same way and to make it as personal as it's been for me.
And then I was going to ask, but now it seems silly, I was going to ask if you've ever actually tried CG animation yourself.
I did.
You did? Yeah. No good?
Well, I tried to just learn it. This was on Tangled, and I wanted to relate to what the animators were going through. And there was a orthographic view of Rapunzel, and I was trying to make just some simple gesture of her turning, and her head turns and then her torso, and all I could end up with was this horribly twisted person. And when I animate, I feel what I'm animating.
Yeah.
I was physically, it was painful. I was feeling like this torqued, unnatural position. And finally, I said to the animators after that, I said, I tried to animate in CG today. I know how hard you work just to make something look bad. And of course, that's what they printed out above the Animation Daily's room. I know how hard you work just to make something look bad. It's
my gosh.
That's not what I meant, really.
Yeah.
But I sympathize with that.
I mean, that sounds like it would have only have made you a better director anyway. So.
Yeah, I don't take it for granted how hard they do work. But it was incredibly important to have John Cars alongside, who really spent a career living in the problems that they have to solve.
Yeah, that's a good point. So then, were you able to spend a lot of time up in Vancouver with the ImageWorks team, or was it more of like a long distance sort of thing?
We did spend a lot of time. We had a lot of trips back and forth.
Yeah.
Doing lectures for the animators, talking about who the characters are, why they're designed a certain way, the importance of hair, cloth, communicating what we were going to be doing with Guo Pei's designs and how that was going to be for Chang'e.
Her costumes.
How are we going to animate a 9-foot tall goddess? How is she going to move?
Yeah.
So many things that we would get there. But I actually, in my office at Netflix, I had a big monitor on my wall, which we called the window to the world. And because we were working with people in Holland, in France, in Spain, in Shanghai, and Vancouver, and New York. So that was part of our natural way of working. So when the pandemic hit, and we all had to leave within a half hour, we were all gone from the Netflix building, and the next day was a deadline, the following week, and the following week, and we hit those. We continued because of we were already ahead of the game in working that way.
That's good. This was like such a global production, and then obviously one of Pearl's goals is to tell more distinctly Chinese stories. And then you're an American, and then it's, I know you're working with a Canadian studio, and then it sounds like it was even more global than I thought. So, I mean, were you ever worried about approaching this story, again, knowing it still is a very universal story, absolutely. But was there concern about conveying this culture, and then also knowing that it was going to be released theatrically in China?
Yeah, I was very aware that this was not an American telling a Chinese story. I'm an American. I felt like I was embedding myself in a Chinese mindset, surrounding myself with Asian artists and voice talent.
Yeah.
My producers are Asian, and the artists that were there were constantly guiding and helping me through the process. Spending time in the little town of Wuzhen was absolutely wonderful. It was like everything I smelled, I tasted, I touched, I heard.
Yeah.
That's what I could not wait to share with the audience. To sit at a dinner table with the grandparents and the parents and the children around you. It was about food. I mean, the first time I talked to the animators there, or the visual development artists in Shanghai, tell me about yourself, tell me about your path, creatively. And I thought they would tell me about art school, where they went. Instead, they told me about, well, in the northern province of China, our favorite noodle is a flat, wide one. And then the other one would talk about their favorite noodle, and it was food. It's so much about sharing food and identity in that. And I knew that family dinner was going to be the bookends to our movie. Fei Fei in conflict with them, and then at the end, Fei Fei now in harmony, and everybody's the same, but she changes in there. there was one point to just understanding culturally the little things meant so much. Like Fei Fei gets a gift from Mrs. Jeong, and I knew a 12-year-old how they would 12-year-old American would respond if she's getting a gift from somebody she cannot stand.
Mm-hmm.
You would know exactly that there was something underneath the way that she received that would tell her, I don't like you.
Yeah.
But I was talking to the folks in China, and they said, oh, no, you cannot have her give any sign other than total respect, because you don't understand. I mean, it's generational. The roots go thousands of years deep. And in America, what, a couple hundred years? We just don't, I don't get that.
Yeah.
So she would bow with sincerity. So we did that. And then those same artists said, no, that's not right. So what? I mean, did she bowed? We did exactly what you said. Yeah, but Fei Fei is younger. That's kind of an older generation bow. She would bow much more subtly, a tiny little gesture, but just as sincere. So that's what we did.
Yeah.
And that fine tuning was all the way throughout the movie.
Mm-hmm. No, I definitely felt it. My husband's actually, he spent his childhood in China. So I watched it with him, and he was like so excited the whole time. Like I had to kind of shush him, because like as soon as Fei Fei, he's like, that means her name means fly in Chinese, like
so
fly,
cool.
fly. And I was just like, no, like you're not doing this the entire film. But we couldn't help it. He was so excited. It was, you know, of course, Chang'e is a known story. Mooncakes, you know, we served them as they were at our wedding. Lotus flowers, the Tiango, the sky dog, and cranes. And then also, of course, just like to your point, like the bookends of the family dinner, and even just like that lazy Susan with just those classic dishes, and like that circle like of the family, and like everyone together, and even just like the ping pong and like just different stuff where like he was thrilled. So it was very fun for me to watch this with him and see that. And something else that he pointed out that meant a lot to him as well was how different looking all of the background human characters were. You know, I feel like a lot of times in CG films, when there's, you know, background characters and even her family, you know, with their characters that are maybe going to be only in one or two scenes, it's like sometimes they're just like, you know, derived from the same base model. And whether or not that's true, I didn't get that feeling at all. Like they all just looked like fully realized humans with lives outside of this story. And it was kind of like a small miracle to see that in a big feature animated film, because of course you don't see that a lot with Asian character. So like just that little detail of just seeing this very diverse looking family was like remarkable, honestly.
Well,
Yeah.
Jen, thank you for noticing that. Spending time in China was such an important part of that, drawing the people there, having a sketchbook, studying the faces. There's something wonderful about coming in and animating at the point of discovery and sharing what you just see. We worked really hard at understanding an Asian structure to a face, the higher cheekbones, the double eyelid on that beautiful curve of an Asian eye, what that is, because if you don't get it right, it's not right. It just like, yeah, but no, that's not it. It was very important for me also to shake me away from a traditional Disney look. That was difficult because, you know, that's in your DNA. And I was designing the characters, and but something didn't feel right about it. It's like, why does this look just like it's a Disney movie? It's got to have something different. It's like a song that's stuck in your head that you can't stop singing.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, how do I think fresh and different here? And but my hand always wanted to go on a familiar path.
Yeah.
And I was looking on Facebook. This is very early on. And there was this drawing of Ariel from Part of Your World. And I thought, oh, there's one of my drawings. It's like, wait, it's not one of my drawings. No, whoever's doing that is kind of painting it with color. It's like, it's not my drawing. It's actually better. I like it a lot. What is she doing? This is this girl, Brittany Myers, young, early 20s. And I just felt like, I want that in what I do. And I said to Jenny, my producer, I said, I want that in my drawings. She said, well, let's hire her. Oh, yeah, we can do that, can't we? Yeah. So Brittany came in, and working with her, working with Celine Desrumeaux, I surrounded myself with young talent that I felt like I could learn from.
And I'm sure that was wild for them to hear, not for nothing.
Oh, well, yeah, I think that there was sort of like, what? No. But really, they could see that it was having a true impact on me. I call it reverse mentorship. And that's what I've been living on this film. I owe so much to that group of talent around me on this film.
People my age, grew up watching all of your work. So I can only imagine what that means to them. Speaking of that, I have to ask about the beautiful 2D animated sequence at the beginning of the film. I saw there was like a small 2D animation crew, and I know there were a couple other little 2D moments that were nice. There was like that really cute rocket with the Méliès reference. I assume that was not a hard sell to have Chang's, like the setup of her backstory to be done in that style.
Well, it was just selling it to me. And so I just thought, all right, I'm going to keep this for myself.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just a self-gratuitous kind of a thing too, because it needed to stay in the world of an illustration, not go to CG at that point of Chang'e and Heyi. And I spent a lot of time doing drawings from, 1,000-year-old drawings of Heyi and Chang'e and what the rhythms were like in those curves. And this was a chance for me to really talk about an idealized view of what Chang'e would be like, how she would move, who she would be, and to keep it in an illustration world. So that when Fei does, when we finally present Chang'e, it's like, wow, what?
Yeah, just completely opposite. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did like her. I liked that your first impression of her is, of course, the ridiculously catchy song and like Philippa Sue. So, of course, it's going to be catchy. But then it's right after that, of course, she has this kind of sneer and like she's so unlikable. And then the more you learn about her and like by the end, how like you kind of shift. And for me, it was like how like emotional I got, like understanding her, like why she was like that and why her heart was so cut off to people. It was so lovely because I love seeing stories that don't have like a more traditional villain. The villain's not the right word to call her by any means. She's just like a person in pain too. So I really loved how you handled her.
If there's such a thing as a villain in this movie, it's death. It's how do you overcome that obstacle that is so impossible to overcome?
Yeah.
The sorrow, the loss. I mean, that is the darkest part of this film. They're both caught in the same whirlpool that pulls them down. And Chang'e was representing where Fei was going. Somebody that's become very much just what you described. I'm very happy to hear you say that. What we were doing was taking a sacred symbol, a legend from the Chinese culture, and we were going to turn her upside down. And this was the scariest part of what we were doing with the film. Taking something that's so reverential in their culture and turning Chang'e into a nuclear version of Lady Gaga, Katy Perry, and
Yeah.
whoa, okay, we can do this, but we've got to get her back right side up, and not just the way she was, but better.
Yeah.
Before the film, Chang'e is a woman on the dark side of the moon longing for her lover. At the end of the film, she's still on the dark side of the moon, but she has worked through it and now is open to love all of those around her. She's a true goddess, and
Mhm.
she's moved forward. And I believe that what we deliver back to the Chinese culture is, I'm hoping, a richer, um, deeper goddess to them.
Mhm. No, I hope so, because yeah, that scene in the dark area when they were both at their low point, because like, yeah, their performances, just that, like, what do I do, like, what now? It was just like it was so good. Whoever animated those moments, but it was very upsetting and relatable, like all at once, and how much she grows on you. Yeah, was really impressive.
A very important part of that was at the very end of that, as Fei Fei is singing to her, um, trying to help Chang'e move forward.
Hmm.
And then she remembers Gobi's song that he was exiled for.
Yeah.
She sings that back to her,
Hmm.
and Chang'e realizes the message of that was the thing that she'd been rejecting all along, but how true it is. And
Hmm.
it was just such a wonderful thing to realize that at a certain point in our story development and the song, to let that come in, and it worked so seamlessly into that.
Yeah.
Uh, it was one of my favorite little victories in actually doing this movie.
Yeah. No, and Gobi was such like a I feel like he was one of those characters where I feel like when you first see him, you're just like, I don't know about this guy. And then how much they grow on you over the film, and his like very silly perceptiveness was really nice too. And Ken Jeong was so funny too.
Ken Jeong, I mean, I didn't know he could sing.
I
And
didn't either.
you should check out online, the Masked Singer, and type in Ken Jeong creep. And when he's,
Yeah. Oh,
I don't
he
know if you've
sung on
seen it,
that?
it's like a big pig, and it's
Yeah.
singing, and it's like this. Whoever's singing there is so
Oh
amazing.
my gosh.
And when I heard that, it's like, okay, Gobi, we have to have this song, which I'd always felt like we needed a song there with Gobi.
Yeah.
But and what Chris and Helen and Margie created was so beautiful.
Hmm.
And this simple little ukulele playing, it was so very different than everything else.
Yeah.
Really, a lot of that was inspired story-wise by a summer vacation driving across Wyoming with my family, and this huge open space, and just the magical feeling of dreaming and thinking about how wonderful life is at that point in our life, with our kids in our car driving out to Minnesota. But I wanted there to be that feeling with these frogs just floating quietly across there, a
Yeah.
time for reflection.
Yeah, I love that. It was like a very like Miyazaki-esque moment of just like them just on these frogs on the moon, where I was just like, oh, like I love how ridiculous but like peaceful, and how much it made sense for the film. And that was even something too. I feel like that song being one of the, well, I guess probably the most like kind of low-key songs, um, was like a nice break, I guess, because like Act Two, when they get to the moon, all of a sudden we're hit with this crazy, wild, whimsical world, and all these shapes, and all the color palette just completely shifts. I was wondering what it was like designing the world of Lunaria, and if you were worried about it being too much or not, and if it was difficult to kind of stage action clearly in this with all of the colors and everything happening. So how was that process of like
Yeah,
the
it's a
designing it?
great question. You nailed difficulty of it when everything is a light source around you. How in the world do you actually
Lead the
light
eye. Yeah.
anything? Um, Celine Desrumeaux is a true genius of color. I mean,
Hmm.
I learned so much about her, and she's very passionate. When when we were in this little town, Wuzhen, um, we were walking around in the town, and she says, "Glen, look at the white walls." I said, "Yeah, they're white." "No, they're not white at all. There's the blue and the green and the yellow and the brown." And she was pointing out the reflection of light, and everything in this little town was about how the light comes through in the morning and shines on the mooncakes, and the moisture in the air, and it was all about reflected light.
Hmm.
And we were trying to figure out how are we going to do the equivalent of what Wizard of Oz did with black and white Technicolor, and going to Lunaria, because everything we were looking at, we were thinking of what are the buildings like, kind of modern architecture, but more, and try to come up with something that's modern architecture, but more, and
Hmm.
everything looks just like it's something from Dubai or somewhere else. It really looks like Earth. Um, I'm thinking, what in the world do we do? And I saw that the Pink Floyd "Dark Side of the Moon" album cover, and I gave that to Celine. I said, "Think about that
Yeah.
white light into a rainbow," and that was that was the direction that she went with. Earth is reflected light. Lunaria is going to be source light glowing from Changa's tears. Um, but still, we needed to think about what the buildings would be like.
Hmm.
And years ago, I mean, sometimes the solution is something that happened in your past that's just there creatively, waiting
Yeah.
for its moment to shine. And my wife and I were uh, at a Italian restaurant in Paris. And I have my sketchbook and I'm drawing people sitting around me. Mostly my sketches are of my wife drinking a glass of wine. That's kind of most of my sketchbook is that. But next to us is a young guy, and he sees me drawing and he comes over and he says, um, "My grandfather was an artist too." I said, "Really? Who was he?" He says, "Miro." I said, "Your grandfather was Miro?" He says, "Yes." I love Miro. Miro's got these wonderful childlike spheres that float in colors and space, and it feels so childlike and beautiful. Um, and so he gave me a book, signed it to me, and was sitting there. And then at this moment, I realized this is where we got to have Miro's world, but Celine took it another whole dimension further, letting those the glow happen from the inside out. And I'll never forget when she finally figured out how to do the very thing that you are talking about, how to get the lighting so that Fei still feels dominant in a shot and yet has all of this light around. It's probably one of the most difficult things you could possibly do. And I hope you talked to Celine Desrumeaux.
Yeah.
But when she showed that to me for the first image, all I could do was laugh and cry at the same moment. It was like, oh, and those tears. I was just like, this is ludicrously beautiful. It was so wonderful.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, I was looking at some of her work right before this, and I saw like yeah, she's done such beautiful projects that yeah, they all have like this beautiful color palette, and yeah, with this one, it was just especially impressive because it was so busy, but it wasn't overwhelming, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I felt like it must have been quite the iterative process.
Yeah, she's a very, very passionate person. And if color is not right, as it would be like a plastic bag of the aunties coming in was the wrong color and they just
Mhm.
couldn't get the color right. And she just remember her like hollering out, "It makes my eyes hurt."
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh man. So I think I am getting the signal from Daniel to wrap things up. There's so much more I'd love to ask you, but I really, really do appreciate you taking the time to talk to me about what we were able to talk to. I guess to formally wrap us up now. Yeah, congratulations on a wonderful feature debut, Mr. Director.
Thank you very
It's a
much.
long time coming in my opinion. So I'm very happy to see that. I'm really excited to see whatever your next project is.
Thank you, Jen.
Yeah.
I can't wait to share whatever comes next as well. I look forward
Yeah.
to talking to you again.
Yeah. Yes.
A lot of
Thank you. All
Thank
right.
you for your patience.
Yes. No, thank you. Thank you for your time.